Over the years in MMA, we've seen some outstanding fighters with impressive resumes. Take Dustin Poirier for an example. Dustin has defeated top competitions like Conor McGregor twice, Michael Chandler, Dan Hooker, Max Holloway twice, Eddie Alvarez, and Justin Gaethje. His resume and career just in general is phenomenal. But today, I was thinking about creating a list of the most underrated resumes in the UFC. These are fighters who have a lot of good wins in their weight class, but they don't get much recognition, whether they're a champion or not. Now, this list won't be a tier list or a top 10. This is just a list in no specific order whatsoever. But to start this list, we're going to cover each division from flyweight all the way to the heavyweight division. First up is the current flyweight champion, Alexandre Pantoja. Now, one of the main reasons why I included him is not just because of his impressive wins, which I'll discuss shortly, but also because he doesn't receive the recognition or respect that he deserves. He's arguably one of the greatest flyweights ever, possibly even the second best flyweight of all time. And look, man, if you look at the people he's beaten, like Steve Erceg, Brandon Royval twice, Brandon Moreno 3 times, Alex Perez, and Manel Cap, that's a solid list. Some of those guys are really good. You can even argue that Pantoja's competition is more higher than the level than Demetrius Johnson did during his title run. I just feel like nobody talks about his resume or accomplishments because they find him boring, and he's a flyweight. People even call him a crotch sniffer because he often takes opponents down and holds them there if he doesn't finish the fight early. And I just want to mention that the dude has taken out 60% of the top 10, maybe even 70% at one point, because Matt Schnell was in the top 10 at one point. Like Joe Rogan said, people forget, man, that Pantoja's really that good. He's really beaten some good names, but at the end of the day, nobody cares. So I just want to give him some recognition. Next on our list is none other than Petr Yan. Now, I know that at one point he was on a 3-fight losing streak from 2022 to 2023, but he recently got a big win against Song Yadong, which is huge and great to see. And every fight that Petr Yan does lose to was to a great fighter, and every fight was competitive too, besides the one against Merab. All the other ones were close though. People often forget the crazy hype that this guy used to have. Sure, it might have faded away, but he just proved that he still has it when he fought Song Yadong. Because of that recent losing streak, people seem to forget how good he actually is. I mean, look at his resume. He has wins over Song Yadong, Corey Sandhagen, Jose Aldo, Uriah Faber, and John Dodson. And if you ask me, the fights that age particularly well are his wins against Corey Sandhagen and Jose Aldo. In both of those fights, Yan showed how good he is. His fight IQ is ridiculous. With the way he's able to read his opponents and adjust over time is just phenomenal. I think it's even more impressive when you consider his fight against Aldo. In the beginning of that fight, I remember Aldo landing a lot of leg kicks and liver shots, but eventually Petr Yan adapted and started countering. It just showed you how good this guy really is. Petr Yan is phenomenal and arguably very underrated, especially when it comes to his resume. People forget that this guy was a champion at one point, man. It looked like he was going to run through the division. Obviously that didn't happen, sadly, but that's why I made this list, to remind y'all. Anyways, another fighter that I wanted to put on the list is Edson Barboza. Now, he's obviously not the greatest fighter in the world. In fact, he has double-digit losses, but he's beaten some notable names, and it kind of makes for a good, decent resume. This is why I consider Edson the best gatekeeper in the division. I mean, just look at some of the fighters he defeated. Sodiq Yusuff, Dan Hooker, Beneil Dariush, Gilbert Melendez, Anthony Pettis, Paul Felder, and Bobby Green. I just had to put this dude on the list. He rarely has a dull fight. He's arguably one of the most dangerous gatekeepers because of his kickboxing. He's the only fighter in the UFC who has finishes with head, the body, and the legs. So he's probably the lowest person on this list, you know what I'm saying? But I just had to include him. He's just so underappreciated, and we're all gonna miss him when he's gone. Moving on, we have arguably one of the most boringest fighters in the UFC, and that is Belal Muhammad. Now, Belal has an amazing and underrated resume. I mean, look at the people he's beaten. Gilbert Burns, Sean Brady, Vicente Luque, Wonder Boy, and Damian Maia. If he ends up beating Leon this Saturday, then he's got to be up there as one of the greatest welterweights. I still think Usman and GSP are higher on the list, but you can arguably put Bilal technically in the third. Even if he beats Leon this Saturday, I think he still won't get his credit. A lot of people will continue to disrespect him, which sucks. And the fact that majority of his fights went to decision means that they will never give this man the time of day. But overall, he has an extreme underrated resume. Up next, I'm gonna put Jared Cannonier. Jarrett has beaten a lot of solid middleweights. I mean, just look at the list. Marvin Vettori, Sean Strickland, Derek Brunson, Kelvin Gastelum, Jack Hermanson, and Anderson Silva. That's actually pretty good, especially having Silva and Strickland on there. I just feel like Jarrett doesn't get that much attention. It's not necessarily that he's boring, it's just that nobody really cares to talk about him. Moving on, we have Jan Blachowicz. This guy almost went from being released to obtaining the belt, and he beat a bunch of massive names. Jan is extremely underrated and has an underrated resume. The dude's beating names like Alexander Rakic, Israel Adesanya, Dominic Reyes, Corey Anderson, Jacare Souza, and Luke Rockhold. I think beating fighters like Izzy or Reyes is incredible because Izzy looked untouchable before he came up to the light heavyweight division, and Reyes looked incredible when he arguably beat John Jones. But when you look at the list in general, there's just 3 to 4 big names that like really stand out, like high level names that he's beaten. Obviously Izzy and Reyes are there, but you also have Luke Rockhold and Corey Anderson. He has probably one of the most impressive resumes on this list, I would say. But I'm hoping that this dude competes soon because I think he's pushing 40 and he hasn't really competed since he lost to Alex Pereira. So yeah, very underrated. Very underrated. He does not get appreciated enough. Up next on the list is Derek Lewis. Derek Lewis is the only heavyweight I never understood how he made it so far. I mean, I'm aware he has power. A lot of heavyweights have power. But somehow this dude was able to knock out everyone. And his resume is actually one of the best ones on this list. I mean, look at the people he beat. Curtis Blades, Alexander Volkov, Francis Ngannou, Marcin Tybura, and Travis Brown. I know Derek seems to be slowing down and that the weight class is starting to evolve, so he hasn't really looked that hot lately. I mean, he has been getting some wins, but it's not like he's been facing high level competition and knocking them out. People forget how much this guy made an impact in the sport, and if I'm not wrong, I believe he was actually the underdog in most, if not all, of his fights. But yeah, guys, those are the fighters I decided to put in my underrated list. There was some I obviously left out, but those were the most important ones that you guys got to see. But if there's anyone that you guys thought I forgot or who should have been on the list, let me know in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And like always, guys, I'll see you guys on my next one.